Welcome back, folks. Guess what? We did it.
Woo!
We stemmed that tide.
I'm
sitting here, whole bunch of tide. None of it needs stemming.
Stemmed up good.
Oh yeah, stemmed it like a pro. We thought that we would fill up some time here and go over all of the lovely little Easter eggs that Freeman left behind in our lovely adventure of stemming the tide. I'm sure those Abomination Vaults left some secrets we didn't explore. I'm sure there's some shit Freeman wanted to do to us he wasn't allowed to. So, we're going to put out a couple episodes here. We've got a behind the scenes for each book of the adventure, and then a little extra with some fan questions. I'm going to start with book 1 here. Your old pal Duncan's got some questions for your old enemy Freeman. Number 1. What's your deal?
Yeah, so.
No, I'm just joking.
Yeah,
Okay.
Spit it out. What is my deal? Well, I grew up in New Brunswick as an ex-Mormon.
Over the course of 160 episodes, I think we know what your deal is, Freeman. So let's actually start off through book 1 of The Ruins of Gauntlight by author James Jacobs. We will start at the beginning, I guess. We discussed a bit about what we were going to do for this project, and you landed on Abomination Vaults. So above the other APs, what drew you to this one? What made you want us to dungeon dive ourselves to death?
Yeah, I mean, Mega Dungeon, it was like the first Mega Dungeon for Pathfinder 2nd edition, right? So that was an appealing thing for, I think, a lot of fans. And I'm not actually off the top of my head. I'm not sure they ever did a Mega Dungeon proper in 1E off the top of my head. But it's a kind of a classic trope. It meant lots of combat, lots of themes, lots of, and like a steady sort of track of levels that you get to focus on, which I thought was going to be kind of pretty fun, actually. I just thought it'd be a fun dynamic. Of course, the challenge is that when you get to a Mega Dungeon, you have one level and you've got to have the whole level mostly prepared at any given time. So you don't know what direction anyone's going in, but you have that sort of reliability of people like, you're at one level, you're not likely to be on the next one. So you can kind of keep it self-contained in your prep. But I also really loved the concept of the hub town. It's like gave me such a video game vibe, when you play certain RPGs and you go to this town and you go do the series of quests around it and then you move on to the next town. But this is a whole adventure with just this one town. So I think it's well documented at this point, but I put a lot of effort into like the sort of player buy-in at the beginning to make sure you all had some sort of attachment to the town to sort of drive the personal stories. They didn't go the directions I think any of us thought overall, but it still anchored what we were doing. So I thought that combo was a really, really good way to cut our teeth on making this podcast.
Right. Yeah, I remember you telling us that we did have to keep in mind that we were in a bit of an ecosystem that we were going to keep going back and going to have to deal with the changes that happened. So it was really neat to see how that evolved, and it'll be fun to dig into that a little bit.
Could you have shortened your answer to hard on for Diablo 1?
Probably. Yeah, I mean, that's yep, could have. It's funny, I love Diablo 1, but I never really played it until I'd already played a bunch of Diablo 2. And I was one of those rare instances I went back to the OG and found a love for that sort of gameplay loop. It's a really cool game.
Yeah, there's a simplicity to it, and it definitely does. Yeah, I did think of that immediately when you brought up Abomination Vaults. It's the kind of classic dungeon dive.
I hadn't really thought about that, but now I'm thinking, stay a while and listen.
Well, I mean, yeah.
Also, they have done one. It was called Emerald Spire.
Oh, Emerald Spire. That's right. Okay. Yeah.
Because it has a hub town, too, that you go back to, too. And you explore around. You explore a little bit around the town, but mostly you're just dealing with the spire.
Good call. Thank you, Kim.
But yeah, I was a little bit late, but my buy-in was absolutely different there.
Yeah.
I did not get the town buy-in.
That's true. But I have notes on your buy-in, but that's going to be the next book.
Yeah, it's also interesting that that's reflective of your character, where you had kind of more of an attachment to the vaults than the town for at least the first chunk of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. So stemming the tide, we say it a lot. We've stemmed the tide. Now that present tense verb is past tense. Why are we stemming the tide, Freeman? Why is this the name we landed on?
You know, it was a really tough one. We had a really hard time naming Uncharted North. You might remember. And we ultimately weren't even really quite happy with Uncharted North, is what I recall, when we finally landed on it, but we had to have something. And it's grown on me, you know, like many things that you start to learn to appreciate the simplicity of the thing you chose. And Stemming the Tide was one of those things we were struggling to name the show, but I was the one with the most context for what was going to happen. And at some point I had chosen it because it felt like a familiar phrase to me. Like stemming a tide felt like a classic familiar phrase, but maybe not a common one. And I liked that. You know, to me, it felt familiar, but it felt like you don't hear it very often. And but it also had this very specific connotation to the dead tide of Nimbaloth. And so it was a slow burn. And I remember just telling everyone, look, we're going with this, and I just need you to trust me. It's a good title because it's going to properly connect to the story as you discover it and all the sort of little extra nuances. So I'm still very happy with the title of that for a show. And I think when it finally got revealed, it was pretty neat.
For sure.
I have always loved the title. You know, in my mind, though, definitely through this first book, it was just more about the waves of undead, the potential waves of undead coming.
Yeah.
And then, you know, there was the reveal that it was more than that.
Yeah.
And so that was always really cool.
At the start of chapter 2, it's literally the event in the graveyard. It's in the book. It's labeled as a dead tide for Otari. I don't know if I ever said that. I'm sure I actively avoided saying it specifically because I didn't want to bury the lead on the what a dead tide is. But it was there from the beginning.
Yeah, and it was really, it was evocative that it just kept kind of getting more and more apt to the adventure we were on as we got, you know, more into it, into learning what was going on. You know, you see Lighthouse and you think you know it all by that. So that was really cool.
It was really about trying to stop what might seem like an unstoppable force, you know?
Yeah. And we did put that trust in you. I think you also just told us to trust you with naming the episodes. You know, there was a bit of back and forth on episode titles until it was like the beginning of a book. I think you nailed ones, and you know, with the power taken out of our hands, I can say that you made some good decisions on those ones.
Okay,
so
thank you.
Don't tell the listeners I said that. Listeners, don't tell your friends.
Cut the mic.
So let's get into some adventure proper on book 1. So book 1, this is our first 56 episodes. We're covering levels A through D, 1 through 4, so the Gauntlight ruins down to Belcora's retreat. Is there anything in there that we didn't engage with that you really wanted, that you had prepared?
Was there a stone we didn't look under?
It's a difficult one because I was like hyper prepared for the first book for sure. I was trying my best to make sure everything was like as the adventure is written, which, you know, not always the way in retrospect, I know I should have been a little more flexible, but we were all learning the system too, right? So I did a lot of focus on making sure that I understood everything that was happening in the story that was involved. The thing that comes to mind is that in chapter 1, there was a lot of fear from all of you. You were all very cautious. And so the one thing that you didn't engage with that I'll always remember is you never engaged with the blood on the floor in the lighthouse.
Interesting. Might be a question later.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. You always skirted around that. And you also, the handling of the Fleet leader, Boss Scrong, was like, not that you missed it. You were there. You engaged with it. But was there more? Yes, there was. So we'll cover some of that for sure.
For sure.
But was it way better the way things actually happened?
It was. Well, I mean, the way things happened was pretty badass. I think we all know James's brutality in that moment was something to be lauded. But
very cool.
Just trying to be true to the character.
And then you got mad and killed the character. So
yeah. But there's more to reveal there. We can get into that in a little bit. So chapter 1, everyone was very cautious. Like, and you had a right to be. You were going back to town very frequently. You were getting your asses kicked pretty quickly. I didn't really have the balance worked out for a 3 PC party as well. So like part of that's on me. But ultimately, you didn't really miss anything. You engaged with most things other than the blood on the floor. And you cover your bases there. For chapter 2, there was probably a bit less fear as we got comfortable just recording and going through the motions. If memory serves, I remember you being a little less fearful anyway. There were a couple of moments where I had to sort of hold back a bit. Which one was the blood siphon and one was the river drake. They were really nasty creatures. But it makes me think of a side note. The river drake had a name, and the name was Fresnel Kesh. And I kind of love that they give you those things, because it's like, we never had a druid or anyone would speak with animals or any of those feats that allows you to communicate with an animal like a little bit more one-to-one, but you still have, if it's an intelligent creature, it has a language or an understanding of some kind, and it has an identity. And, that's kind of littered throughout a lot of these adventures, and certainly the Abomination Vaults. So I thought that was kind of cool. For chapter 3, you actually all were amazingly thorough in exploring that whole area. You got pretty much all the secrets, as far as I know. Found all the secret rooms. I have a little bit to say about the large flesh statue that you had encountered in the final sort of like cult battle, when you took down the cult leader, Nakazarin. But I'm going to save that because that's actually connected to the next book. So we're going to save that for the next episode. I have notes on that somewhere. But suffice it to say, it was a good thing you tore said flesh statue down, which I think was motivated by either Tulok or Gilda or both. I don't quite remember. If there was a small thing you might have missed on that chapter, it would have been, if you might remember this, there was a small room in which there were 2 cultists that were like venerating the corpse of a gibbering mouther. And there was, do you remember, does anyone remember that?
Yep.
And I remember someone achieved some kind of check, I'm quite sure. And you did learn about this odd amount of reverence they had over this body of this, aberration. But I don't think it ever came into play. But in that room, it would have been, if you had like done anything to attack this sort of dead mound, it actually would have shocked them. They're like so reverent towards this thing that it would have made them slowed 1 for a round in the middle of the combat. I can't remember if that ever happened or not, or if I employed it. Maybe you walked over it and I employed it or something like that. But I remember there was like, okay, there's this room and it's got this weird element. They're like weirdly reverent towards this dead creature, and you can kind of rock their world. They become so shocked by your irreverence, even if you do by mistake. I thought that was kind of cool.
I think Tulok grabbed a doll.
Yeah, I remember something like that too. There was some like effigies kicking around, and there was a doll grab it. Yeah, that might have been part of it as well. It's been a hell of a long time though. Yeah,
Hell of a long time. We are talking 3 years ago.
Yeah, for real.
That's fucking crazy.
Yeah, there was chapter 4 was a bit easier to cover as far as a map goes. Like it was a pretty large map, but there wasn't like a bunch of rooms. Like the library level was so many rooms and corridors. But this one was like, it was easier to get everything in. So there was only one that you almost missed, which was like the little cavern that connected some of the areas with the Scalathrax inside, like behind the Cairn White like sarcophagi. But but mostly I think you covered everything. The only thing you actually did technically miss on that level at that time was the final room of like Belcora's personal quarters. But that's when the Void Glutton was coming at you all and you had to run away. But you eventually did return. You guys remember returning?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, and we didn't really miss that. We ran away from it.
You ran away from it. Yeah. You knew it was there. Yeah, it's not like it was a mystery.
Had to redouble our efforts several months later.
Well, we had no answer for the magical darkness, and that was a no-win situation.
Pretty much, yeah. But that room, when you did finally return, you might remember you went in and you were hit with like a wave of despair, and that wasn't part of the adventure. I just took that off Belcor's spell list and tossed it at you for flavor.
Cool.
The only other thing is that I think it's not doesn't really count, but there was that the room with the poltergeist. There was like a chute to go down, like a garbage chute.
Yep.
You never did go down it, but it did just lead to like the cavern next to the pavilion, like where that dead Otiug was. But you never did quite travel that route.
Volek did though. That piece of shit.
Volek did, yes. That's right.
And look where that got him. Spoiler alert. So let's touch on your research system really quickly. That was a really neat mechanic that you had introduced into the game pretty early on, and it helped us, get a lot of info that we probably wouldn't have otherwise gotten. So is there anything that you expected us to get out of it that we didn't?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, the whole point of it was to like find a vehicle to introduce more information to you all, because the adventure is so cool. It's got like the current state of the vaults, and then it's got the original purpose, and in some places it's got like what's happened between those two instances over centuries, and it's really difficult to just give that. You can give it out meta wise to all the players all you want. I could just be, oh, here's a fun fact, but I wanted like to really find a way for all the characters to understand a little bit more of it. And I originally thought, oh, I could just like create a bunch of flashback scenes that like happened, and like these hallucinations or something that happened to the characters, so they could see events in all these rooms. But there's so many rooms. It was like, oh, that's a daunting project to just write all of these little mini scenes everywhere you go.
Right.
So I kind of figured that I actually took the inspiration of the research system from the Malevolence like standalone adventure, because it's kind of built on this system. But I also didn't like, when I was reading that system, how like one topic just covers a very small amount of information, and so they have a whole bunch of topics. So I thought, oh, what if I make fewer topics but more expansive, and then give some of that interaction to the players, like make it a job of you to, it's something for you to engage with, and then that reduces my workload basically. So what I ended up adding into that was the opportunity to research in advance creatures, like a recall knowledge for a creature, particularly wisps and flesh warps. That's the thing I feel like you didn't get into as much as I had expected. It's not very often you get to in advance research a creature. Yeah, maybe you won't encounter that creature, but we could have had more opportunities where, if you guys had like sort of dug into it further and more actively, we could have a list of like, here's the wisps, you've, checked that off the list, you researched that one, that was a success. And then if you do encounter it, you're walking into an encounter with an effectively free, successful recall knowledge check, because you did it in advance. But you guys didn't really take advantage of it. You took advantage a little bit in the wisp side, but not at all in the flesh warp side. And you could have known about dresh cans. You could have known about various creatures,
Sounds like that would have been smart in hindsight. I think it was easy for us in the time to not want to spend extra time, what limited downtime we did take, which was probably on us not getting the full experience that we could have. But it's hard to not want to get right back in there and, put them up and go boxing against those wisps.
Yeah. It's always been a fascinating part of this adventure, and how much the time pressure was what you all put on yourselves, not what I put on you.
Yeah, and I think that was definitely a character choice that I made, which may have changed how we interacted with the game slightly, because I thought that was a part of Tulok's character arc.
Get back down there and keep going.
Yeah, and had Harold been introduced earlier, maybe that would have slowed earlier. So, for better or for worse.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly nothing wrong with that approach. It just was a very interesting dynamic that no matter what I tried to do to dissuade you or tell you, you have time, you can take some time, you can order that thing, you can retrain a skill, and none of you would bite. So
Well, I think narratively a ticking clock element usually works pretty well. And look, we banged it out in a clean 160 episodes.
Not too shabby.
And also, just to touch back on the research system, I do think that just as far as interaction on Discord is concerned, it's probably one of the things that a lot of people came specifically to the Discord to ask about or get your advice on. So I think that that was actually something that a lot of the listeners kind of took away from the show, which is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is
Definitely,
super
yeah.
popular. I think maybe we can just touch on really quickly if there's any, like you mentioned the changes that you made in condensing the research topics and making them a little more broad. Were there any other changes you had made or wished you had made to the system?
Yeah, I mean, one of them was like the system is designed around like, this, you do this check, it acquires you a certain amount of points, and when you hit a certain threshold, you achieve new information. And I set those thresholds differently for every topic based on how much information was available for those topics. So it's like, I'm pretty sure it was something like, thresholds were more points for like the history of Otari, but the history of Otari had about, 3 things to discover. Whereas like Nimbleoth and Belcora, they had a lot more discover. So the thresholds were smaller. And then I was found a way to like sort of combine the information into categories or segments that were appropriate, as given by the adventurer or just customly grouped together by myself. And then there was a certain point where when you look at like the flesh warping and the will-o-wisp ones, they had basically a larger threshold, I think, at the beginning for like certain topics that I thought were more relevant. And then they had like a infinitely repeating opportunity to just like get 2 more points, more information, get 2 more points, get more information. That's where like the creature stat blocks came in. So you had this recurring element where usually your venue or your library, quote unquote, have like a limited amount of points that you're able to acquire from, which was true about the Dawnflower library, and then less true when you got to the underground library. But I kind of, the thing I added that I think I liked the most was that, you hit a certain point in one of those topics and it's just an infinite loop of acquire 2 more information, acquire 2 more information until the information runs out. That was not, in my experience, part of the original library research designs that I read.
Okay. Yeah, no, I really like the system too. And like you say, like having to come up with, a bunch of lore dumps or little scenes of your own is a lot less satisfying, I think, than letting your characters kind of earn it.
Yeah, it was a little bit less immersive too. Like I love a good info dump episode, but if they're the only way you can distribute information, it does get kind of dull after a certain point.
I mean, they make it easy to edit because I just have to mute everybody else and you can talk forever. But it is fun to get a bit of interaction out of it from time to time too. So speaking of you talking forever, let me talk for a bit. Host insight time. I ran some numbers, folks. I hit the old Spotify lists, and I just want to go over some. This is some pretty basic info that we have, but I just want to show some signs that we've got some life out there, because it's nice that we put this out, and it's awesome that we have people come into the Discord and interact. But I mean, the people in the Discord is a small chunk of the total listenership that we have, so a lot of the times it does kind of feel like you're putting stuff out there and you're not sure how it's hitting. So let's go over our wrap up. As of today, I'm going to part the kimono yet even further. We're recording this on June 18th, so we haven't quite released all of our episodes. But as of today, we have 35,351 total plays over 1,334 days, which ain't too shabby. So book 1, and time-wise, book 1 was our longest, over 561 days. That gave us 7,167 listens.
That was also, our first year was a bi-weekly release as opposed to a weekly release.
Right, exactly. And we saw a pretty significant jump after that. So book 2 was 399 days with 13,618 listens. And book 3, up to today with still 2 episodes to release, is 374 days with 14,566 listens. So a big thank you to the listeners out there. That's crazy that anybody kind of like listens to the sound of our voices and comes back for another episode. That's pretty cool. Our monthly high was 1,600 on the dot. Our daily high was 179. And I'm going to give a bad stat of days with 0 listens, which is surprisingly small, with only 23, the vast majority of those being in that first year of every 2 weeks being released. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
that's pretty cool. I'm pretty a bit happy.
Only 23 days out of our 3.5 years was there 0 listens.
Yeah, 23 out of 1,334 days.
Even on Christmas.
Pretty cool. Even after was listening on
Somebody on Christmas a couple years ago just walked up and downloaded all the episodes, so I hope they had a great Christmas.
They were avoiding the family like the plague.
Hell yeah. Hey, we're your family now.
That racist uncle joined the dinner table and they're like, I gotta go listen to something wholesome. And for some reason they picked Stimming the Tide.
I was like, that's a mistake on the first part.
A lot of freaks out there, and we love them.
Yeah, we love them.
And we do have some limited listenership demographics. Because we're on the Spotify list, we only get, limited information for Spotify listeners. But I just thought we'd go over our global reach here, because in these 1,300 plus days, we have reached 59 countries. At least that's where the downloads are coming from. They might be some spoofed VPNs, but 59 ain't too bad.
Not bad.
The top 3, unsurprisingly, US, Canada, and Germany. Half of those Germany are probably PJP.
I love that Germany's our third one. Something that just has always struck me as funny is that, Germany has always been on our top list.
Oh, yeah, no, it's consistently up there. And there is a pretty good contingent of Germans hanging out in the Discord. So, shout out. Guten Tag.
Shout out.
Yeah, so that's us. That's us in numbers, and only gonna be going up from here, I think. If that's how math works.
What's the strangest country on our list that
Not the
never
strangest,
expected?
the most obscure. That's the word Freeman's looking for. Obscure.
What is the filthiest? No, I'm joking.
Oh God,
Just like cut the mic.
Canada,
Jesus.
obviously.
The phrasing you're looking for is what country surprised you the most?
I mean, Papua New Guinea, probably.
Freeman caps off the show by getting canceled.
I'm reminded of our episode 2 of Encounter This, the second episode James and I ever produced as podcasters, in which I received criticism for phrasing something like some strange dialect in like a country, because of course it always comes back to the fact that Yetis speak the language Yeti, which we've always joked about being absurd. But you're all right. It's throwing strange out there willy nilly is a bit of a misnomer.
Yeah, so somewhat surprising. I mean, there are a lot of them that are
Now you
like
bringing gnomes into this?
Yeah, what did Glash do to you?
Oh, so this is what it's like. But outside of like the really, really statistically insignificant ones, Brazil, Argentina, and Poland, I think, are pretty surprising. And they're all, not a ton of listens, but some. They're not a 0. And that's us in numbers. So back to you, Freeman. I got some questions for you of the generic type. What did you love about this book?
That is quite the generic question. This book in particular, I think it actually really plays into the research thing, in that one of the things I love about the book, the adventure in general, but very much the first book, is the details of all the rooms you go in, the areas you go in, what they once were and why. Because there's this constant theme of writing in the books of like the history of the Gauntlight, and she was building the Gauntlight and the vaults from the top down, right? Not the other way around. So it shows to me how intelligent, resourceful, patient, and well planned a person that Belcour really was in life, and also plays into like the patience of biding her time as a ghost for centuries. She's a super vengeful villain, horribly cruel, but never really rushed herself at all, was infinitely patient. And her demise was ultimately the result of drawing a little bit too much attention in the wrong ways. She had lots of connections, lots of resources. She never got ahead of herself, but she drew just enough attention in a rural part of the Isle of Kortos that some adventurers decided to go investigate, and they just happened to be powerful enough to kill her. And so I think that's a really cool thing that's really introduced into book one. Like you get that history of Belcoir right away. You get to see from the GM side of the screen how much detail has gone into what was the keep used for, what happened when the Rose Guard attacked. You get down to the next level. They didn't know that the next level was there. That was the servants' quarters. You get down to the library level. The librarians turned themselves to the ghouls to continue their work, but that was because they ran out of servants to eat, basically, and cannibalize. Like it gets really gritty in that sort of history of what was there, what happened since, and where it is now. And I think that's probably one of the coolest things I love about the first book.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you see the decay at the top, and I like how you mentioned that she was building from the top down, and you almost expect to find like increasing decay as you go down, and it's quite the opposite, which is
it is quite the opposite, yeah. Because you might remember that at the very beginning, one of the first things I put out there was the ruins around the lighthouse. The lighthouse is pristine, but the ruins around it are not nearly as decayed as they ought to be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because of the magic of that lighthouse, because it cannot decay. And for being in a swamp left alone for centuries, it should have been almost nothing. But yeah.
Anything in this book that you wrote out? Anything that you didn't want us to find?
I don't think anything ever got removed in this book. Like I said earlier, I was really keeping everything like as written as much as I could at the beginning. Eventually I did actually remove the I don't know how I removed the blood from the lighthouse, but I changed what I was going to do with it, because at a certain point it wasn't worth using as written when you did go investigate. So I did eventually rewrite that. Can't remember clearly the circumstances in which you did finally go to investigate that. But it was well after, the level 1, period. So I kind of just neutralized it, I guess, and used it as inspiration for something later. But generally speaking, I removed very little across the whole adventure. If anything, I just added things to the mix most of the time.
Cool. Which is pretty impressive, especially given, we were doing a 3-person party for the first little bit. I'm sure it was a bit of a challenge.
It certainly was.
Well, I am almost loath to let you toot your own horn for a minute here, but what was your best bit of GM improv?
GM improv. I'm such a prepper in more ways than one. No, I'm.
What's that even mean?
You have no idea how many contingencies I have for Scoot's death. Whew.
Finally got your wish.
Improv wise, maybe not completely legit, but I remember the moment you all discovered Jal and then basically triggered him of his own 30-year-old trauma and then walked away. I remember thinking in that moment, I know what I'm going to do. And it was going to be that whole Night of the Howling Moon segment, and that was it. I knew I was gonna do it, and I ran with it. So it wasn't an in the spot improv, but that was an immediate strike of inspiration. It was like, this guy's coming back and he's attacking the town and someone's gonna die and it's gonna be a whole thing. Yeah. So
I thought you were gonna say something like Ian Yasmara's voice.
What are you talking about? Yasmara has always been very well practiced.
Yeah, it was good improv because it was different every time.
One of the other things too, I think is, do you remember the scream I gave to the lurker in the light fae, Shimmergrin? I remember I was ready to scream on mic when it turned around, giving you a murderous scream, but I don't think I even prepared myself for how much I was going to put into the screen. And I'm very very hilariously proud to say that it scared PJP twice. She went back for a re-listen and it still scared her. So sorry about that, but I don't think I was even expecting my own energy put into that one. But I don't know if that's quite improv, but
What'd your neighbors think?
No, I don't know. I never heard from them.
Moved out shortly after. Weird coincidence.
Yeah.
Question, just going back to Jal. What did you think we were going to do when we encountered Jal? Did you think we were going to kill him? Do you think we were going to turn him in? Or did you think we were going to leave him like that? It was a tough one
I really-
morally for me, I thought at the time.
Yeah. Well, I think because if what I remember is that you did succeed a check to realize who it was, or Tulak did, I think. But no one had been from Otari for long enough to have experienced the event of the original attack from Jaw. It was 30 years before, killed Kalino Lathanar's wife, and betrayed the whole town, you know. And so I think I managed to give you some information, and I think that's why it created the moral dilemma. I think if you had a better idea of that event, Tulak would have been a little bit more vengeful and attacked on the spot, even before becoming a more desensitized and sort of traumatic character. But what were you gonna do in there? I really didn't know. You know, you guys were kind of guns a-blazing a lot of the time at the beginning, so I maybe at the time I expected you to just fight, but you know, I was certainly ready for it. But yeah.
Made fun of him, then came back later with a bar of soap, and then got attacked by werewolves.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Well, I think generally speaking, there was not a lot of improv happening through the first book. I really was like going out of my way to be prepared, make things accurate. I was figuring out the balance a lot, and we were all kind of on edge for the first little while, especially the first chapter, I think, to try and make sure we're doing a good job. But so a lot of pre-planning happened. A lot of my improv is built on a pretty strong foundation that I built for myself. That's for sure.
Yeah. Good job on your homework, I guess, you keener?
Thanks. I'll take it.
How about player improv? Any standouts from book one?
Yeah, I mean, I have to begrudgingly give a great amount of credit to Scoot for Tulak. Tulak always had great role play, always had great scenes, and I mean the putting Jarell Caldrian's ghost to rest in the bookbinding room, like that's one that I'll never forget. Never mind the fact that it introduced one of my favorite running jokes of giving him bookbinding lore, and how much that continued to come up. That was super fun. So yeah, I mean, big credit there for sure. Obviously, Dunk, you were the quick one-liner hero of our whole production. So a lot of the episode titles are a quote from you. Maybe it's not in-game quote improving per se, but actually a lot of them are character lines, right? Like probably the majority of them.
I wish we had stats on that, but I'm not willing to do the work.
Yeah.
How many Dunk
for real.
episode titles?
If anybody's listening to this right before they do a re-listen of the whole show, maybe keep track of some stuff.
Yeah,
I'm
just
not going to
keep
do
track of who we easily, Dunk, you have the most episode titles. There's no doubt about it.
If you do, listeners, and it's verifiable, we'll send you some goodies for sure.
Oh yeah. There are treats in it for you, for sure.
Big treats.
We'll find something. Big treats. We're sending Scoot. We're gonna send Scoot in a crate.
He'll eat the packing peanuts. Don't worry.
That's
You'll be
right,
fine.
baby.
Yeah. Especially if we pack them with real peanuts. No, but that being said, we've talked about it before, probably on air, but definitely off air many times. Speaking of episode titles, one of the earliest, best improv things I think ever happened was from James with Samal and the scene when he goes back and talks to Rin after being almost dying in the Gauntlight ruins. And that scene where it's one of the very few serious episode titles we have that isn't just some bit, you know.
You know me.
And it's you know me. Yeah. You know me, but you don't know who I am was the quote. I'll never forget it.
It's one of the best role plays, if not the best, in the whole show, in my opinion.
It's so good.
Incredible.
And the fact that he dies shortly after is so heartbreaking. You know, it's so brutal. And like, and to me, it's also just sets a stage. It's more than just like that improv quote and line. It's like there's a line in there. I don't remember the direct quote, but there's a line in there where he's talking about Zori as well, you know? And it's something like, you know, I'm the rock and Zori is the wave that crashes on me or something like that. You know? And it sets that stage, I think, for all the scenes that James wrote that followed, that cover the love and loss of those two characters, even though neither of them saw a tremendous amount of screen time, as it were, in the whole production. There was a weight between the two of them, I think, that was just constantly in the backs of all of our minds, and it all started there, in my opinion.
For sure. Yeah, I think James definitely, the threads through his writing were absolutely fantastic. And yeah, thinking back to Tulok, like his earnest speeches, his earnest, monologues were some of the most gripping parts of the show quite consistently, which is cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we kind of covered it, but was there anything in this book you were hoping we'd really find that we didn't?
I can honestly say that probably for book one, you found like nearly pretty much every nook, cranny, and secret room that the book had to offer. If anything was missed, it might have been like through the misinterpretation of information I gave you, or creatures, or history. But it's really only the blood in the lighthouse that was the one thing that kind of got accidentally passed over.
Oh, well, it's funny you should mention the blood in the lighthouse, because we are going to book-specific questions. And book-specific question number 1. What was that darn pool of fresh blood in A11 of the Gauntlight base?
Yeah. Here's the thing: is that it plays into the fear that you all have when you were exploring it originally. You maybe you remember this, but all of you refused to go into the fog fen and the Gauntlight Keep at nighttime. You would not adventure at nighttime, and that blood was a haunt that only triggered at nighttime.
So we were right, is what you're saying.
Good job, team.
Sort of, yeah. Because basically, if you were to go in there at night and into the lighthouse itself, it would basically like take on the shape. The blood would take on the shape of Belcora but start shooting lights from its eye holes and its mouth hole, kind of like a shining child, and just spin around the room like a lighthouse light and just fuck you up. And it's actually like a well-known like kind of because haunts can be really difficult at level 1. It's a well-known kind of PC devastator at the beginning of this adventure, according to a lot of Reddit posts that I read along the way anyway. And then actually, if you defeat it, what happens is it ascends the lighthouse in like a spray of mist and like seeps through the hatch above to the cupola. And then if you go up and follow it, it's like the blood is all covered all over the lantern up there. And then it turns into a vampiric mist creature. So it goes from a haunt to a creature, and then the creature just, fucks you up some more. And then that process repeats itself every night.
Fuck.
You actually can't stop it until you kill Belcora.
Well, that sounds horrifying.
Yeah.
Glad that we got to bed at a reasonable time.
Yeah. There was one time you actually stayed the night, I remember, in the fog fen, but you sat there and you watched like the glow of the lighthouse like increase as the sun went down, but you did not go anywhere near that lighthouse.
Nothing good happens after midnight.
Yeah.
Real scared. But I mean, it probably, that cautiousness did help us get through the entire floors, because we didn't want to go to the next one where scarier shit was.
That's true.
Going to Boss Scrong, had he not been summarily executed by Samal, would we have gotten anything useful out of him?
I mean, what a crazy moment, right? You guys all always ask me this question: was there more? And I don't think I've ever told you until what I'm going to tell you right now.
And you're still dragging it out.
Still taking your sweet ass time.
James, do you remember at all what Samal said before executing Boss Krong? I don't, but I don't even know if he said anything. Did he just do it?
I think he said something like, "We don't need your help," and then he just cut off his head or something like that. Like it was,
yeah.
He was very definite. He made choices and he stuck to them.
Yeah.
And I believe it was 2 axe strikes to the clavicle into the same wound.
That sounds right.
I mean, that does sound very right. Yeah.
It was metal as hell with the boarding axe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was a mercenary in a past life. His whole thing was to protect Izori, right? So this is just, if you're gonna drag an old dog out of retirement, make sure it's the dog you want.
Yeah.
It was real John Wick.
Yeah, it's a real John Wick vibes. Yeah. Yeah. The thing with Boss Scrong was he could have provided a reasonable amount of information. What was it like? Gonna game changing? No, but it could have given you a bit more prep, or at least more mystery to follow. So basically, like the story of the Mitflits being there at all at the ruins of Gauntlight was because they were in the floor below, but they were ousted by the Morlocks, but the Morlocks were there because they were actually further down, and they were chased out by something, ended up in the library, which then they couldn't contend with the ghouls. They had to keep going up. That's why Augrael exists. You might remember Augrael is a Morlock ghoul. So Augrael was lost amongst his Morlock tribe, basically. And so Boss Gron could have given you more information on that. He could have told you to expect Morlocks on level 2. You actually might remember when he died, he said something about mushroom eyes. That was a reference to the eyes of a Morlock and the way he interpreted them. And he could have expanded upon what had chased them up here.
Well, the guy sucks at metaphors, so I'm pretty glad we cut his head off.
Yeah. So like Boskar, like he had his pet spider Bite. All the Mitflits, they were called the Mudlickers across the board. Like that was kind of their tribe name. And you may remember when you arrived and you started like parlaying a little bit, there was like a small sandbox with like a map written in it, and he used his trident to just like wipe it away. That's because he had a rudimentary map of Otari on it, and he absolutely planning to attack Otari, even though like I have in my notes here is he had a grand plan, read Delusions of Grandeur, to attack and take over Otari. Like obviously he was never going to accomplish it, but he really doesn't have an idea of the scope of what he could do.
That would be pretty funny.
Yeah.
Attacks at the same time as the first wave and no one notices.
So he has no idea that he's actually pretty inconsequential, in the grand scheme of things.
Mm-hmm.
But he could have given you warning about the river drake, which he would have referred to as the swamp dragon. He could have warned you about the corpse lights in the shrine where Samal died. He called them bogies. He actually knew about them on the 4th level as well. He could have told you to expect them down there. If you were to have coerced or bribed him in some way, he would have actually provided you with a rudimentary map of the 2nd floor in his sandbox. And in a little bit further beyond that, he would have told you about the Morlock leader, Gralgust, whom he would have referred to as the magic priest, mushroom-eyed guy who can hurt your brain just by looking at you. Yeah. But the really fun part of that is he wants that guy dead. He wants the Morlocks destroyed because they ousted them from their home. And he would offer you a reward of gems. But if you actually if you were to take that side quest and come back, he actually has no reward for you. And then he just like begs for your mercy because he's got nothing really.
He probably would have ended up with his head cut off either way. So okay.
No, for sure. Exactly. James just expedited it. Really.
Saved some talking and some drawing.
A little less rigmarole. I think that was Samal's mantra.
I don't think Samal ever said rigmarole in his life.
Hey, let's move over to that giant purple worm in the servants' quarters. We had some talk of it.
Oh yeah. No, I'm actually glad that this question was brought to my attention before we recorded this, because I completely forgot that there was some nuance to it. It's not a lot. But what's really cool is that that purple worm is in the footprint of the Gauntlight. The footprint of the Gauntlight is indestructible. So the purple worm was actually transported there by Belcora and could not escape. So it was wholly dependent on Belcora, and Belcora considered it one of her favorite pets. And when she died, it was abandoned and just starved to death.
Well, that's sad.
Yeah. So a really good example of like, here's a room with something strange in it, but like, how are you supposed to know? How are you supposed to understand what happened, why it's there, what happened in between, and what the current state is? It's a really cool one. It's just a small thing, but it's brutal.
Should have brought it up before we had the fight with Belcora.
I guess I could have, Scott. Oh, by the way, chapter 2. In case you didn't have enough reason to kill the ghost of Belcora, she let a purple worm starve to death.
Yeah, and she let my sea monkeys die.
That's an episode. That's a behind the scenes episode.
Yeah, that's the episode of this behind the scenes. So, during episode 30, I Fear for My Safety, which could have been the title of all of them, but it was good for that one. We were investigating the library and stumble upon the devil Corlock. Had we fought, how deadly would that fight have been?
Oh, that's a good one, because we're still figuring out that balance of the 3-person party and in our dynamic. So like the short answer would be, if I think at that point, if that's level 3, at that point I think I had boosted your level ahead one, so I think you were level 4 around then. Which means it would have been like a moderate encounter. Had you still been level 3 with just 3 people, that would have been severe. But also, like, your track record beyond that with those bearded devils and the brutal bleed they have, it probably would have been really deadly given your strings of luck for that particular creature, because they're the ones with the infernal bleed where it's a DC 20 to overcome the bleed unless you're like administering first aid all the time. So
yeah,
that came up a few times, and that I think that alone would have made it extra deadly, even with your level up.
Yeah, likely. I mean, we still had Physic on board, and he was not doing too hot with the heals.
Yeah, and it's not like being one level higher meant that the Corlock would not have hit you. He would have hit you a lot, and it could have been really dangerous. Yeah. So I think I Fear for My Safety is really appropriate episode title and title for that question. Yeah, it would have been bad.
Well, glad we didn't stop the game there, as we might have.
Yeah.
So moving down a level to Belcora's retreat, without that blue wall that we needed all the tools of the Rose Guard to dissipate, was there any way around that without the path that we took?
Oh, yeah. As written, no. In the first book, the answer would be no. It is wholly focused on you finding the spirit of Otari and him giving the information to find the icons of the Rose Guard and put them on that altar and get rid of that wall. That wall, as written, is a 9th rank wall of force. That spell starts at level 6. So even if it's a 6th rank spell, like there was no chance really for you. Or very little chance, but 9th rank, it's just no way. That being said, if you do lean into book 2 a bit, if you decided to just ignore the Ghost of Otari or destroy it and ignore the whole quest, like I could have found a way for you to get in there via the smuggler's cave that you would have encountered Karen or Johnny in, and there was that entrance into the next level. But otherwise, like as written, the book assumes that, like, these books tend to assume like a standalone, like as much as they connect together, they always tend to assume a standalone adventure in a way. Like you can just like go take book 2, set everyone up and play that as a standalone. So I think that's part of the reasoning why that wall of force was impassable and there was no other option in the first book. It's like, that's the end of the book. You have to do this one thing.
Yeah, and it doesn't really seem out of place in a mega dungeon scenario. You're kind of used to having, you've got to complete some goal to get access to the next area kind of thing. So it felt kind of natural.
For sure.
So, Volek, bit of a dick, right? Besides that first encounter, where he quite cruelly took the life of one little Physic, the Slouch, would we have been able in any way to like murk him at that point and end his stupid wormy life?
I can honestly tell you that most of the stories I've read about people encountering Volek, the vast majority murked him and killed him in the first try. So recurring villain is very much my doing. Absolutely not in the adventure. He, there is that trick to, like, he discorporates and you have to kill all of the leeches that kind of spread themselves out. But it is perfectly reasonable to have done it the first try. But like ultimately, I love the fact that we had this recurring villain, especially one that was, once a dedicated subordinate to Belcora, and in like such a kind of like absurd fashion. Like that is written in the book, his absolute dedication and his vanity attached to it is like a very much part of that story. So what I wish I had done more of with that is give more evidences of his traveling through the vaults, after he did kill Physic and move on and like escape. I wish there was like I had made more notes about put dead leeches over here at this drain or by these cracks in the wall or something like that. And one of the things I actually do regret with Volek was that it's in the book, and I know at least one other podcast did manage to put it into practice. But I regret that I forgot. I literally just forgot about it. And it's that, you know, that you found that lantern of empty light in his office where you first encounter him. He's actually meant to be like on the surface outside of town, like wandering around with it, and it looks like a wisp in the forest. But that is actually the reason why Laz de Vankerville was abducted, because he went to investigate the light, and Volek abducted him a year before the adventure starts. So I really wish I had employed that as like a sort of foreshadow and like a reference to something that happened in the past.
No, that's, I mean, honestly surprising that he wasn't meant to be a recurring character like that. So, I mean, that might have been nice, but I think having him come back as that recurring kind of more present danger, like a real foil that we had, you know, fear of instead of a bit more of a nebulous threat from Belcora was really, really good.
I think one other thing worth mentioning with Volek too is I love, like, it was a kind of a turning point for me in realizing when I need to pull a punch. Because there's, as much as he was kind of being beaten down, he chased Physic out of the room, and as far as I remember, he could very well have turned around and just destroyed everyone else, you know. But it made me realize that, like, this is a character with motivations. Even one of those motivations was, which I held back for a long time, was like, why did he chase Physic down? Physic was using slash damage. Physic was the one who actually could exploit his vulnerability, despite rolling terribly. Physic was the larger threat now and in the future, according to him. So that's why he chased Physic down. And then also he escaped because he has bigger motivations than to just like face down this group of heroes. And he did manage to kill the one that he felt was the biggest threat. And so what I loved about that scenario is it's a, you know, this brutal thing, but also it made me realize I can use a character motivation to pull punches, and then we can see those the moments afterward, really explore the traumas afterward of like opening that door and seeing Physic on the floor, like pulled apart by the leeches, like, you know, and then explore the role play of the fallout of that. And, you know, so like I never want to pull my punches just because I'm worried you're all gonna die, but like when I know there's some nuance to come out of it, like I don't mind doing it at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a wise decision. There's definitely more drama to be had, and more interesting story to kind of delve into with having to deal with the aftermath among the survivors than just having your whole party wipe and starting fresh. Although that doesn't make me forgive you for Volek chasing down Physic and then coming back and killing Gilda and then coming back another time just to be a dick about it.
I'll still sleep tonight. It's okay.
That's fair. Yeah, you got a big smile on your face. I'm not too worried about it. But that's all I had for questions. Any of you cats around the table, this digital table we find ourselves at? Anyone want to add anything?
What do you think Tangletop's doing right now?
Tussletop.
That's a very cute one. What is Tangletop?
Was it Tussletop? Fuck, I could never
No,
get
it was
that one.
It was Tangletop. It was Tangletop. Tangletop's a brownie. Tangle's a fae. Probably completely forgot any of its interactions and is wandering in the fog fen somewhere, if not dead already.
I mean, Physic felt bad about stealing that ruby or whatever from him, but it looks like Tangletop got the last fucking laugh on that one.
Yeah, that actually reminds me of, I have a little tidbit here about you know, when you encounter Tangletop, you actually then in one of the next rooms is when you fought Mr. Beak, the soulbound doll, which is a well-known PC killing encounter. Because one, the soulbound doll at the beginning was like overtuned and they had to retcon it. And two, the uneven ground rules with the glass shards in the floor absolutely can destroy you because of like how the death and dying, like your dying value increase rules go. So it's like, could be really, really bad. And I remember, I have a very vivid memory of you all backing out of there. And that's when Raphael was first in the party, and Raphael like in the hallway, like shooting his crossbow off, like, oh my God, we're all going to die. You know, just like absolutely fruitless combat. I think it was the first time you all properly ran away.
Yeah. I remember hearing a bunch of cacophony coming from that workshop. And it would have been so bad to get beat by Mr. Beat because he was such a prick.
Yeah.
Real piece of shit.
It's not a real proud death, that one. Yeah. Obviously, one of my other big things is like, I mean, we've talked about it so many times. The biggest regret is the death of Samal, like that rules mistake, that basic rules mistake that many people have gotten wrong, but like, oh, it hurts. I'm so glad at all the things that came out of it, but like it hurts. It still hurts that like that's the sort of thing. Like there's still a chance he would have died because the rolls were really bad, but like if we got the rule right, the possibilities for survival would have skyrocketed. You know?
Yeah, those what ifs are never gonna go away.
Yeah, exactly. So, but we certainly made the most of it.
You've been very diligent about that turn order every death sense or every chaos.
It really
sense,
helps that Foundry automates it now, so
yeah,
it's great. Yeah,
we can just blame it on an automation error.
Yeah. And there was another PC killer thing I'll just throw out there too. In the level 2, remember the dioramas of Absalom?
Yeah,
had, like traps in them. And you guys kind of snuck up. Someone snuck up and just deactivated them, like systematically, basically. Like that's a PC killer hallway, like well known back when Abomination Vaults first dropped. Like a lot of people would die in there. So pretty sweet that you managed to pull that one off.
Yeah, that was a very nerve-wracking hallway.
Yeah, I don't remember who was doing it. Was it Tulok doing the thievery checks in there?
It might have been a mix of Tulok and Physic.
Yeah, I really can't remember. Yeah, who cares? They're both dead.
Yeah. The only other things I can add to this whole thing is that I'm very proud of the fact that I birthed the joke of Bad, aka Leroy Brown.
He was the baddest man in the whole damn town.
He was, and I was still a little bit annoyed that most of the cast didn't get the joke until later, and I had to explain it.
Sure didn't.
I'm so glad we made it our own thing, because like I just remember being like, oh, there's a whole crew of Osprey Club members down here, but there's 3 of them named and there's 1 dead, and there's nothing in the adventure that gives them a name. And I was like, oh shit, I didn't think of this.
My favorite is you trying to deliver that first bad Leroy Brown, because you are bursting at the seams, trying not to laugh.
Bad, aka Leroy Brown. His real name's Bad. He's so bad. I think you said it. He's so bad his parents named him twice or something. So good. And a quick shout out to, I think, 2 of my favorite episode titles of all time: Spirit Lore in Chapter 4 and Anything Shelf. Those 2 still tickled my funny bone. It just
they're both so
up.
good.
They're so good.
I remember Anything Shelf, but what was Spirit Lore in context of?
Spirit Lore was you. You had Spirit Lore, and then we went in to find there was like bottles of wine.
Oh yeah, in
we were trying to figure out the value
room.
of them. You had the wine of reasonable value. Remember?
Right.
You were
right,
like
right.
Spirit Lore check.
Right.
Oh, that shit killed me. Yeah.
At least I got one.
Oh, so good.
No, you got a ton of them. Scott still has my favorite episode title. I don't know if it's book 1, but it is Book Measuring Contest.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh shit, yeah, that's good.
That's book 1, guys.
That is book 1.
So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for your time, Freeman. Thanks for letting us know all the things that we missed, and we are going to be back next week to go over book 2. Tied Stemmed.
Who's hosting that one? You'll have to find out.
And that's where
Okay,
we're
we
gonna
can
call
stop holding hands now.
Oh, that's not gross.
Oh, just a little more.
Why is it so
My hands
clammy?
are all clammy. Stemming the Tide is an actual play podcast of the adventure path Abomination Vaults and is produced by the Uncharted North Network. Stemming the Tide uses trademarks and/or copyrights owned by Paizo Inc., used under Paizo's community use policy. We are expressly prohibited from charging you to use or access this content. Stemming the Tide is not published, endorsed, or specifically approved by Paizo. For more information about Paizo Inc. and Paizo products, visit paizo.com. Music is composed by Will Savino and artwork by Greyhood. Stemming the Tide is recorded remotely using Foundry Virtual Tabletop. If you wish to connect with us or support this project and projects to come, we can be found at unchartednorth.ca, patreon.com/unchartednorth, and on all major social media platforms. Links to all credits can be found in the episode description and our website. Thanks for tuning in.